Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Objective. We're going to be talking about political phenom and rising star out of Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis. I'm sure a lot of you have opinions. We'd love to hear what you think. Leave us a comment, send us a super chat, and leave a like on this video. Most of all, we want to know, what do you like about him if you're a fan of his, or what criticism do you have? Here to discuss DeSantis with me is a guy who he was just actually in my city a couple days ago for some surgery. And after which I saw him, he couldn't lift over 10 pounds. Now, to give you a comparison, I was just in the gym earlier today lifting 25 pounds in each hand. So I don't know. I guess this guy's not as tough as I always thought. It's Mark Pellegrino.
Hey, I was wondering how this introduction was going to play out. Yes,
Yeah,
thank you. You can do 5 times more weight than me on each side now.
that's I guess the tables have turned. So
Hey, but you got 4 days to make good on that. So you better get me now.
all right, all right. I'm gonna hit the gym. Anyway, Ron DeSantis, what comes to mind? Is that one of those exercises like quick? What comes to mind when you hear Ron DeSantis?
Almost nothing. No, I mean, for me, the guy's just sort of a result of the Trump phenomenon, right? He appeals to the right wing populist narrative. I think he does it well, and I think more articulately than Trump. But he's still a child of the Trump era and of the political movement that I think is largely a reaction to the insanity on the left. So as far as I'm concerned, the guy's mostly an empty suit. And if you could come up with something that makes him substantive beyond the populist appeal, I would love to know.
There probably is some good that he's doing, but what makes him stand out, I would ask? That tends to be kind of how we evaluate public figures and historical figures. Like, why do we even know who they are? What makes them stand out? And sadly, what makes him stand out first is he went after, quote, big tech. He tried passing some kind of law that would in some way force social media companies to do something other than what they're doing, on the pretense that they're like a public park type thing. Like they need to allow more political opinions, more diversity, something like that, going after social media companies in a way that I consider an enormous attack on property rights, an enormous step away from capitalism. So that's kind of the first thing that comes to mind. I think chronologically, that's one of the first things he did that makes him stand out. And it kind of raises the fact that to a lot of people, the battle is not for capitalism. It's not for individual rights. To a lot of people, it's a culture war. So to them, beating the left, whatever that means, is the battle. Like, you beat the left and then we can decide, do we want capitalism? Do we want socialism? But no, right now, just beat the left. That's kind of their the bane of their existence. A lot of these people, a lot of these modern Republicans, a lot of these modern conservatives, if that's not a contradiction in terms, the sort of
But
new
they're
right.
correct. But they are correct in making the observation that the left is destroying the country and that they are eroding. I think the right looks at wrongly at what the foundations of our country are, but they are correct in noting that the left is eroding the foundations that make a free society possible. And they are trying to beat them, but not presenting an alternative. I think that is a real antidote to the left-wing policies. They're prescribing sort of reactionary actions against these guys. The first thing that comes to my mind with DeSantis, though, is his anti-mandate mandates.
Yeah, that's definitely those? Next on my list as well. Right. Another instance of him violating people's rights, certainly violating property rights, the rights of businesses to make their own decisions in the but it's seen as like a culture war move. Now, I agree that the left, nihilistic, anti-capitalist, anti-constitutional, anti-enlightenment forces in the culture are ruining the country. But I mean, what makes you say that? Like, what makes you? Can you think of examples to name of how the left are ruining the country in a way that DeSantis is confronting?
Yeah, I mean, I think people understand that, for example, that history is contextual, and you take historical figures and don't judge them by present standards. You judge them by historical standards, and you recognize the fact that they become historical characters for the way in which they were different than, or more outstanding, or uh, uh, you know, uh, just above their culture in a way. And the current tribe decontextualizes history, judges them by present standards and present standards of knowledge, and seeks to wipe out the good that they did by eliminating them from the historical conversation. They're doing this with Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln. I think people who contributed great thoughts to society, that have enabled society overall to push forward and to be progressive, to embrace everybody. They define the terms for us, and they shouldn't be destroyed. And so they are taking those historical figures and trying to wash them from our historical memory. And I think they're trying to link those historical figures to the advance of capitalism, which they in turn link to, the promotion of impoverishment and elitism and classism and pain and suffering. And they are more successful at capturing the culture. They have culture capture now, and it's definitely destructive.
I agree. But I shouldn't say but, I agree. And I think the correct way to answer the left is to say, you're right about the Confederate statues. It is time to get those out of off the street, whatever, put them in a museum, if anywhere. And you're wrong about Jefferson and Washington and Lincoln. But what we are seeing and what we've seen is the reactionaries are protecting Confederate statues along with Union statues and founding father statues. So they're really bad at this. They're really bad at knowing what they're fighting for. Their strength is always attacking the left, just pointing out the absurdity, the extremities, the most outlandish characters emerging on, among the leftists. They're great at doing that. But yeah, they don't have something positive that they're clear on, unless that's good. Sometimes they have a positive message, which is like, nationalism, religion. And I say, count me out. So these are not friends of mine. These are not people I want to see win. At most, I can maybe hold my nose and vote for them if the Democrat running is horrific, but I'm not even sure that's the case after the overturning of Roe v. Wade. I think if there ever was a time to punish Republicans, it was both after the Trump, phenomenon just blew up in everybody's face at the end of Trump's term, and certainly after the overturning of Roe v. Wade. I say, if there was ever a time to send a message to Republicans and say, this ain't it, to use some street lingo, this ain't it. Think of a new brand, come up with something new, because I'm not on board with this. Now might be the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, they won't, because they make a point of claiming that qua tradition is good. And even their intellectuals are going in that direction. This isn't just a populist thing. This is their intellectual movement rejecting the Enlightenment and glomming onto tradition as such, and claiming, that subjectivist moniker the same way the left is claiming it. So yeah, they're not offering any solution to the anti-matter crap that the left is throwing out into the culture. They're just the anti-matter.
Mm-hmm. And things like the COVID pandemic made it really difficult to even talk about ideas anymore. Everything just became about like the concrete issues of the moment. So whether you think COVID is real or not, like whether or not you see it as a serious problem, puts you on either side of the so-called culture war. And then if you trust the vaccine, also puts you on one side or the other of the culture war. And whether you want to encourage vaccination or not, puts you on opposite sides of the culture war. And unfortunately, people like DeSantis, and you mentioned this, used the power of government, used force to prevent private businesses from requiring vaccination of their employees or patrons. So he's not fighting for capitalism. He's not fighting for property rights. He's not, undoing the growth of government done, allegedly done by the left. He's showing us why Republicans have consistently and continue to be agents of government growth and overreach.
Right. So, I think he demonstrates how the conservatives are rebelling against the right thing in the wrong way. I mean, it's true that social media platforms discriminate against conservative voices and amplify voices on the left. What's to be done about that is the question. So it's also true that the mandates were scary, stupid, it did horrible things to people, and it was righteous for a state to rebel against what the federal government was doing to the individual citizens. But how do we do that is the question. It's righteous to rebel, I think, against these state-instituted educational schemes, the anti-racism, the critical race theory, the trans philosophy that's being inculcated in these schools. It's right to rebel against them, but what do we do about it? So right now, what he's doing about it is red meat to the conservative movement, which is just simply populist and reactionary, and has no deeper philosophical solutions to the problems, which I think we as objectivists do have.
Could you tell me about the mandates? Like you said, the federal government was mandating vaccination.
Yeah, I mean, you lived through it as well as I did. The federal government was I mean, the individual states were popping in and falling into line and mandating vaccinations and masks, and it caused a justifiable rebellion on. Look, America has a sense of life that I think enables it to still rebel against arbitrary authority. That's not what manifestations are in Paris or any other part of Europe that I know of. They get all upset when daddy isn't giving them the benefits that they want. Americans get upset when daddy's in his life too much and they want to kick him out the door. And so I think the rebellion was good. It was an expression of American sense of life, but you would see by the people who are highlighted in social media how little that was backed by philosophy and a real understanding of what individual rights meant. And DeSantis was no different in that respect. He was just a high-profile public figure who did more or less the same thing that some mouth breather did, walking into Walmart and bitching and moaning because he had to wear a mask in the Walmart. I mean, that's the reactionary base that DeSantis is appealing to with his anti-mandate mandates.
Yeah, but I don't recall anyone forcing anyone to get vaccinated in America. So like that.
Well, there were subtle forces. I mean, there were societal forces, which you and I would probably be on board with, in the sense that if a private business says, hey, you have to get a vaccination to work here, you and I would say, well, that's your right. It's your right to associate with people on your standards. It's your right to hire people and dispose of your property according to your standards. Nobody can tell you what to do. And so, I mean, we live in a situation, a circumstance now where the lines between public and private are so interconnected and blurred that it's difficult to say that these folks aren't responding to some form of political pressure or to the zeitgeist in the political world and enforcing things that are truly unjust. I mean, even though you and I might not resist it, or I certainly wouldn't, it's still unjust. And people sense that. People understand that, right? That these people are responding to public pressure, and they're responding to something in the air that's not rational. And I think that makes them intuitively, reject it, even if it's private, because they sense it's not rational.
Well, I agree that most people have a hard time differentiating political power from economic power, or an economic decision from a political decision. But when it comes to the vaccine, I think it's always been very clear that nobody's forcing anybody to get vaccinated. And I think this rebellion, is largely emotionalistic and childish to a large degree. I understand a lot of people rightfully don't want to get vaccinated and are upset by the fact, let's say the job that they've been working for now is telling them get vaccinated or you're fired. I can understand that's very upsetting.
If you can't come into or leave the country because you're not vaccinated, what is that?
Is that true?
You can't leave the UK, as far as I know. I mean, Razi would be able to tell me this better than anybody else. I don't believe you can leave the UK and come to the United States without a vaccination, without a record. I'm always asked for it whenever I travel.
I've also been asked for it, but I can imagine, or I can see the United States requiring vaccination for someone to enter, or maybe a COVID test, like one or the other. You just need to show you don't currently have COVID,
which is reasonable.
Okay, so still, I haven't seen this vaccine mandate that people have been supposedly rebelling against. So I think largely people, the right, conservatives, the reactionaries, whoever they are, they've had an opportunity to handle this whole thing with a sense of maturity and to say, like, look, we're not going to accept any force from the government. We're going to rebel against that. But we're also going to use this opportunity to highlight the difference between business and government. But instead, we see people rebelling by going into private businesses without a mask. A lot of these videos have gone viral, and right-wingers were loving it and celebrating it and gloating, seeing, people in their own store getting into fist fights because the person without a mask wouldn't leave. All types of outlandish violations of people's property. So I think, like, I don't see the same romantic element, I guess, that you might see in the sense of rebellion. I think it's largely been incoherent and childish, and it's rebelling against something that largely isn't happening. There is no vaccine mandate in America, and I'm not sure there's one anywhere by government.
It's a rebellion against a wider context of stuff. It's not just the illusion, as you say, of a of a vaccine mandate. It's the culture capture of the left and the way in which they spin information all throughout the entire spectrum of the media. So I think they're rebelling against I would say a long-term process of observing lies, untruths, distortions being promoted as truth, and then capturing the culture and becoming the narrative. And they hate that. And I think it's a much more complex thing. You're right, it is emotional based, but the specific areas of conflict are sort of difficult to capture. It's just a wider perspective of, you're irritating me because you're fundamentally dishonest. I see that you're fundamentally dishonest, and I'm going to fight you because you're fundamentally dishonest, even if those people who are fundamentally dishonest are right in one or two ways. How can you trust somebody who's lied to you multiple times and is winning?
And you have many people who they sense something wrong with the country with regards to race relations. There's the history of racism is definitely here. The attitudes that people have is definitely still in America. The image of Derek Chauvin with his knee on George Floyd is definitely there. So are they right to be emotional and to burn down every major city in America in response to that? Or are the right wingers the only ones allowed to be irrational in response to this valid?
I think somebody going into a Walmart store and bitching and moaning because he doesn't have a mask and making a fool out of himself is different than burning down stores and murdering 50 people. I mean, that's a different response. And some of the people on the right are saying, with respect to the Confederate statues, which I think a lot of people on the right embrace the idea that those Confederate statues have no place in the public square. I think many of them just say there is a way to get those statues removed, not by violence, but by a democratic process. And so in most cases, I see people on the right trying to more or less observing law and certain, I don't know, predicates of human interaction that I don't necessarily see on the left. Now, the extreme right are just as bad in their own way and just as vile and violent. But you don't see a difference between the two? I see one. I
lived in LA during the BLM Summer of Love, and I'm very happy to be living in a city where none of that happened. I'll say that. And I'll take the Republicans and their shenanigans on a day-to-day level for now. But my point being, if it's true that Republicans or conservatives get a little bit of a pass for, well, they're responding to something that is legitimate, like they are legitimate to feel the way they do. I'm saying there was no vaccine mandate at a governmental level, and here the government, DeSantis, took action against private citizens vis-a-vis the vaccine, and so I don't see where the good guys are still the conservatives.
No, they're not. It's one thing to say I understand where the rebellion is coming from. It's another thing to say I understand and embrace where the rebellion is, the response to the reaction. So no, I just understand, I think, where the sentiment comes from, but I don't support any of the reactions. DeSantis, I think, is an authoritarian. I think he's a scary dude. I think the fact that he's gained political notoriety by throwing red meat to the emotionalist populist side of the conservative movement is a very scary thing. That's opportunistic, politically opportunistic, and smacks to me of of the old world, of ancient world, political rivalries and the way in which those men would approach those rivalries. It's not pretty.
It's not. And okay, so we talked about the vaccine the big tech legislation that luckily failed. Maybe we shouldn't call it legislation, call it a law he tried to pass. I'm not sure, but yeah, the vaccine mandates, which he was able to implement. I'm sorry, the anti-vaccine policy. He wasn't going against mandates. But okay, private mandates.
Yeah.
The anti-private mandate, government mandate that he was able to pass. The next thing that comes to mind, and I might be skipping a thing or two, but I know the Disney stuff was definitely noteworthy. So Disney, I guess, stated they're going to do what they can to help educate people about gayness or something. Like there was a law prohibiting public schools from mentioning homosexuality up until a certain grade level.
Yeah.
And then this was seen as a homophobic law. And then Disney said, we're going to, we stand with the gay community on this. We're going to do what we can to fight against the effects of this law, something like that. DeSantis then took away Disney's kind of private city status or something like that, like Disneyland or Disney World. It's Disney World out there. He took government action in response to Disney's opinion, Disney's words. So whether or not you like what Disney was doing, what they expressed was an opinion. And the only way you can justify what DeSantis did in response is if the culture war matters more than actual force. So DeSantis's use of force against Disney is justified because it's a net benefit, supposedly, to the culture war against the left. And I would ask you, Mark, are you on the side of the right on this? Obviously, no. we like gay people. We're not gay, but we've been called gay probably many times on the internet. So I
take it as a compliment.
So is this another example of the right wingers, benevolently rebelling against something bad in the culture? Because they're pretty anti-gay, and you're hearing increasingly on the right that, look at what we're getting now for letting gays marry. They're saying, look, maybe we should, roll it back a little bit on the gay acceptance, because look what it's brought us. They're saying, which to me is akin to saying, look at Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson. We never should have, done away with Jim Crow laws. Like that to me is that's the compare. It's like to say that you should not have gotten rid of actual hatred and racism at an institutional level because X is happening now is, to me, not the right side of an issue. So
I agree. No, look, you articulated it beautifully. They think the culture wars are more important than force. So like the left, they are ends justify the means types of people. And that is almost, I would say, entirely never just. It is never good. This problem could be solved quite easily by privatization. Look, when such a formidable thing as education is in the public square, everybody is going to try to assert their power to dominate, to be the dominant voice in that area, and so everybody's going to be fighting each other to be the dominant voice. Whether or not it is appropriate to mention homosexuality to children at a certain age is a side issue. It may be true, it may be false, I don't know, but privatize schools and let each parent make that decision for themselves and purchase the type of education they want for their children. And I think the market, letting people decide for themselves, is the way to do that. Not this tit for tat attempt to dominate the other the rival party and to win the culture war through the passage of legislation, which he does. So I'm fully against what he did to Disney, and would go out there with a picket sign outside his governor's mansion with that.
Right. It's not only that the ends justify the means to him, but his ends there and the ends of a lot of these conservatives is just straight up get rid of gay acceptance. And none of them have the courage to urge for privatization, for the abolition of public schooling as such. At best, they're saying, let's homeschool our kids and let's get rid of the federal Board of Education and localize the Board of Education, have public schools be local. To me, that's a cop out. I mean, definitely homeschooling is a good step. Definitely charter schools and stuff like that is a good step. But where are the balls? These guys, they're supposed to be so tough, reactionary, win the culture war. Doesn't anybody think capitalism could help with this, like actual property rights and privatization of public schools? I'm still waiting I'm hearing crickets on that front. Okay, one more item that comes to mind, which is recently DeSantis made it illegal, or is making it illegal, or attempting to make it illegal for businesses to discriminate with regards to ESG. So you know all about ESG. To me, it seems very stupid and counterproductive. Businesses are largely under pressure to virtue signal, to pretend they care about this stuff. And DeSantis is saying, well, now you can't consider ESG. It's like discriminating on racial or gender grounds. So problem solved. So to me, once again, he is violating property rights. He is using government to interfere with private business. And in that sense, once again, the only way you can justify this is to say that the culture war matters more than actual rights of human beings.
Yeah, I mean, once again, he's acknowledging something that is truly stupid. Environmental social governance is a really stupid idea that's taken possession of the financial sector, the investment sector of our country, maybe the world, and the corporate sector. It's certainly a trend right now. But the way to fight that is through the understanding that that's really stupid and why it's really stupid. And I think a market would solve that problem a lot faster than him anyway. But certainly he demonstrates how the right is not does not view force as a bad thing at all. They're prepared to use it for their ends, just like the left is prepared to use it in service to their own agenda.
God help us all. All right, let's turn to the chat room. Christopher, not in the super chat, but in the regular chat, said, "Heal fast, Mark."
Thank you.
Not sure I agree with that. I kind of like being the strong one on the show.
You got 4 days.
Oh, all right. Daniel has been a member for 5 months, and he is saying, what would it mean for the left to be beaten? How does that look like? You mean, what does that look like? In America, we say, what does that look? I'm just giving him a hard time. All right. What does that look like? I guess it would be that there wouldn't be pressure, government or private. You wouldn't be living in fear of being called homophobic or transphobic or anything like that. You can basically have your more traditionalist values, and you get back to an even playing field in that respect, they would say, and then we can debate and vote over economic policy, and we can respect people's rights more so than during wartime. Because to them now, we're at war and all is fair in love and war.
Yeah, but I don't know that it would look like that either. I mean, in a free society, those folks have just as much a right to their narrative as the traditionalist, and you'd see those things in the world. It's just that people would be able to act on them independently, and there wouldn't be legal pressure for them to act. There would just be, they would have their own conscience to fall back on. But maybe that would mean some of the leftist narrative wouldn't dominate the culture anymore as it does today, where capitalism is the presumed bad guy and the financial sector is the presumed bad guy in just about any issue we have. There, you might see other voices coming up to the fore, which would be a very intellectually stimulating phenomenon.
It would be, but for now, the right are outspoken against big tech and big corporations, and any corporation that voices a woke opinion. And in some cases, they mean it. In some cases, they're playing the PR game. In either way, I think conservatives would like to see those corporations censored altogether. A lot of conservatives, they want to see these corporations censored altogether because these corporations to them are, again, it's like a public park. They are members of the community. And if they're, let's say, promoting a pro-trans perspective, they are, recruiting our kids, quote unquote, or something like that. So capitalism is not on the menu, I'm afraid to say, in either major party or major political movement, which is why everyone's support means so much. Because Roland with 199 euros says, here's some cash to help beat DeSantis. Oh, he's like, we thought he was going to say the left. He goes, DeSantis. Thank you. Marilyn has been a member for 5 months and says it used to be that the left wanted to control the boardroom and the right, the bedroom. Now they're all fascists and want to regulate everything. Yeah.
I can't disagree.
Right. We're all fascists now, I'm sorry to say. Marilyn with $2 says, good question, Daniel. That's from earlier. Jonathan with $4.99. I think actually on a little behind the scenes, it looks like Daniel, the producer, left our Zoom call here and made me host. So I'm not only physically stronger, but I'm actually in charge of this program. But I'm not sure what happened with him. Hopefully he'll make it back. Jonathan with $4.99 says, DeSantis sucks. He tried to pass a law that would ban social media companies from prohibiting politicians on their website. Yeah, that makes sense. As I recall now, it's coming back to me. It was after Twitter and others banned Donald Trump, of course, the hero in the eyes of some. DeSantis says, oh, I'm not going to let, but and he's supposed to be such a man of the people, right? What's he actually doing? What actually is this? This is a politician telling citizens, you may not ban me, the politician, nor the rest of the political class. See, I can bash the political class. Go ahead.
You should bash the political class. They suck. And that's what makes America unique, is that a company could ban the president of the United States from using them. I think that's freaking fantastic.
Yep. I do think it's cool as well to live in a country and a society where a private citizen can tell a president to get the hell off his lawn or his website. I mean, to me, that's cool. The fact that the supposed, saviors of civilization or the saviors of freedom want to end that is pretty pathetic. Marilyn with $5 says, when I traveled from London to the US in April, I had to take a COVID test to board the plane home. That is no longer required. Yippee. Yeah, I had to take a COVID test as well. So being vaccinated in that case wasn't enough. They wanted to know I didn't have COVID. I think vaccine mandates are not only immoral and improper, but also stupid, because you could still spread COVID even when you're vaccinated. I think the benefit of vaccines is that it minimizes symptoms. So like if you are a vulnerable person, if you're very obese or very old or very sick, then being vaccinated prevents your COVID-ness from putting you in the hospital and killing you. It makes you just basically feel uncomfortable or less. So that's the point of vaccines, in my understanding. You can still spread it plenty, even if you're vaccinated. So I actually understand requiring a test more than I understand requiring a vaccination.
And I understand the test. I think the test is legitimate for entry into the country. I think you shouldn't enter a country in a disease state. I think that's one of the legitimate reasons that a country or its government can deny you admission. And if you're a criminal, they can deny you admission. But for any other reason, you are, I think, entitled as a human being to move from one space to another to improve your life, your condition. I think that's a fundamental right. That now that we've consolidated ourselves into these nation states is increasingly at the permission of the state, as opposed to appealing to the natural right of a human being to move from one place to another.
Absolutely right. Immigration is a wonderful thing. Travel is a wonderful thing. People's lives are affected so negatively, and we don't realize this as American citizens. Like, we get to travel pretty much virtually everywhere. I've never thought twice about, can I go visit such and such country? But other people, they really need to figure out how they're going to visit the U.S. Or if they want to move to the U.S., good luck, dealing with trying to get permission and permission to work. It's absolutely ridiculous. And there is an issue that, you know, the right, the supposed saviors of freedom are definitely on the wrong side of. They have made immigration the bane of their existence. Immigration and abortion, two issues they are dead wrong on, matters to them way more than property rights and, you know, and even free speech. To them, guns, immigration, and abortion are the three most important things. And they could be right about guns. That's, you know, I'm more sympathetic.
Well, I think resolving the abortion issue is definitely a very important thing. Remember, Rand wouldn't vote for Reagan because of his anti-abortion stance. It says something about your position with respect to individual rights that it's fundamental, and I think needs to be ingrained at a constitutional level. You know, a woman's right to her body is an inviolable right, and we have to maintain that all the way through her pregnancy if we're to say there is such a thing as inviolable rights.
Yeah, and my whole life, abortion has been perfectly legal because of Roe v. Wade. So I never really understood why it's so important. Like, why should that be a deal breaker if a politician is anti-abortion? Like, who cares? It's going to remain legal either way. But now that Roe v. Wade was overturned and states are actually prohibiting abortion, I don't think I'll be able to vote Republican. Not that I was really eager to before, but I mean, to me, this is so much more real than like most of the stuff people even talk about in the culture war, et cetera. This is huge. This is going into a doctor's office and telling somebody what procedure to have or they may not have. To me, this is like so much more real and important and urgent than
particularly in your state, Texas, that has passed an onerous abortion law that actually has made me have second and third thoughts about moving there. Of course, I'm looking to move out of California, but what Texas did to the women in that state is reprehensible to me, and I can't see myself moving there. I don't mean to say that you moved there before that happened, but it's definitely something that makes me think.
I might have moved here a little bit after that because I'm remembering us talking about this law. But is this law passed? Is it completely being enforced? I'm still not clear on the abortion situation in Texas.
You would know more about that than I would. If you're in the dark, then I'm dark.
You would think I would know more. But I know like the news out of like places like Indiana is like straight up abortion is now illegal. Unless it's, you know, incest or rape, which makes no sense, right? Murder, if it's murder, it's murder. It doesn't matter how that, right? If someone's the product of rape, a baby is born, can you now kill the baby? Obviously not. So if abortion is akin to killing a baby, then why would it matter? And also, doesn't this incentivize people now to make false rape allegations? I'm sorry to say, if the only way you can get an abortion is if you claim you were raped, will this not now lead to false rape allegations? It's just absolutely ridiculous.
Sure, and you know, it frosts me that conservatives don't see that paradox in their thinking. That if you are making exceptions for rape and incest, for example, they're doing it because the woman was forced. You're still claiming that this entity within her is an independent life with independent rights of its own, and to go back on that with this paradox concedes our point that the woman's rights are primary, and so you know, I think anybody who concedes that point is open to being taken down.
All right. Yes. And Michael in the super chat says Ron DeSantis recently gave a speech about individual rights. It was actually pretty good. I'll check it out.
But his actions speak louder than words. So he can talk all he wants about individual rights. He clearly doesn't understand them in his political life.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to say he might be affiliating, you know, associating individual rights with a bunch of stuff that are anti-individual rights and actually hurting the cause. Jeff with $10 Canadian says Canada only recently removed the mandate for domestic air or train travel within the country. Well, I'm glad they removed it. I'm sorry the mandate was there. That's really horrible.
Trudeau is a bad man.
Yeah.
I hope you folks in Canada can get him out of there because he's killing you guys.
Yeah, he makes me momentarily sympathetic to this idea that people are rebelling against something very dangerous and real. At the same time, it's like we all need to be adults. You know, you can do two things at once. You can rebel against the left and think coherently. So we cannot coddle these people, I say. All right, that Doodle Bunny with $20 says, having grown up in Florida, I've never seen so many California license plates here in my life. California is literally paradise, and people are moving 3,000 miles away just to live in a more free market / rule of law state. I think based on some of the things we've touched upon today, the rule of law aspect is a little bit blurry. I understand on an immediate perceptual level, you're less concerned about having a rock thrown through your store window, but having the governor punish companies or tell companies what they can do is not what I would call rule of law. That is the rule of Ron. But
that's true. Yes, it's true that people don't see it because it's background noise.
Yeah. And then what happens, by the way, when Florida and Texas and all these places become, anti-capitalist states, just like the others, to a large degree, where do you escape to then? Liam with $5 says, Ronald Reagan probably bought us 50 years. President DeSantis may also buy us a few decades.
I don't see how he did that. He didn't really affect change at all. In fact, some of the things he did, I think, have affected us negatively to this day. I think funding the Mujahideen because they were godly against the atheist Russians was one of the worst possible moves he could have done. It funded the terrorist movement that lasted from the 80s and had devastating effects in 2001 for America and continues to drain our coffers and lives today. And his response to the bombing in Beirut was tepid. It was ridiculous. It strengthened Hezbollah and made them a powerful anti-force against American life in general around the world. And that's just some of the things that he did. He did nothing to affect change in the public school system. He did a little bit of deregulation, sort of like Trump did, that has, of course, a stimulating effect on the economy. And he talked a good game sometimes, but for the most part, he was an empty suit.
Yeah, from what I've heard, just one of those items. If he would have confronted Iran back when Iran was first coming up, the world would be radically different. You would have no 9/11. I think, arguably, you would have no Obama, no Trump, arguably. But that's worth considering. Thank you, Liam, for the speculation. I could see maybe in some ways Reagan maybe made capitalism less of a dirty word, like free markets less of a stigma, I suppose. But I'm with
my
you.
World.
Not in your world.
I was only 18 at the time. I didn't vote for Reagan, of course. I thought it was the end of the world, being a Democrat and a leftist. But I don't know that his impact in the way that Americans view capitalism has bought us time, to be honest with you.
I think most significantly, and Ayn Rand was predicting this in her old age, the affiliation of religion with capitalism is a death.
That has been the worst. That has been the worst. And now the affiliation of religion with the founding of our country, with the traditions of our country, has led to a rejection of the Enlightenment by the right, which I think is going to have ultimately terrible effects in this sort of soft civil war that we have going on right now. It's not boding well for us.
Yeah, and when the right are claiming the founding fathers as their own, that's a good day. I mean, lately a lot of them are rejecting the founding principles altogether, saying, this pursuit of happiness, what has it brought us? A bunch of nihilistic social justice warriors that are never satisfied, and a bunch of consumerist, culture types of lives, and unhappiness, divorces, and drug addiction, et cetera, et cetera. So now the idea of conservatives embracing the founding fathers and claiming them as their own is actually a little bit passé. So they keep finding ways to get worse. Marilyn with $5 says, how did they propose to prohibit homosexuality? You can't say you're gay or lesbian. You can't dress a certain way. Agree with Mark. Private schools, in all caps. I mean, I think very few people today are saying prohibit being gay, but they would maybe say they would say roll back gay marriage. They would say definitely keep that any reference to homosexuality out of public schools and public life.
Look, I think in some respects the trans movement is responsible for this, not only because they've just gone over the top with violating the law of identity itself, but they've claimed that everything is a social construct. your gender identity. It can even extend, and everything else about us extends to your sexual preference. And one of the evolutions, I think, of people's understanding, where I think Rand might have been able to go, since she thought homosexuality was immoral at one time, it was the time that when people thought sexuality was a choice, much as they're going back to now. Once we discovered that it's not, that your sexuality is a far more complex thing. I think there are certainly environmental influences on it, but I don't have a choice about being straight, as far as I know. And many of the gay men and women that I know have just been that way for as long as they can remember. And many of my gay friends, I knew they were gay when they were 11, and so that was an evolution of understanding. This is something you can't help, and you can't be held morally accountable for something that you have no choice in. And now they're going back to something else and putting the ball in the rights court to make it a social phenomenon, and then exercise that social phenomenon from our culture. And I think that's awful, scary, tyrannical, and we have to do something about it. We have to fight against it.
Ali has been a member for 5 months and says, "What is ESG, or what was it y'all said earlier?" ESG, it's like a social rating of companies that show that they signal that they're doing good stuff for the environment and for social issues.
Right. Environmental social governance is a rating that you get that lets people who want to invest in your company know that you're doing all the politically correct things, investing in all the politically correct companies. And when you get that rating, if you don't get that rating, you become persona non grata, I guess, in the corporate world, and you risk real financial losses, real devastation.
Yeah, and there may be a degree to which the federal government is rewarding such things, just like they incentivize all types of stuff, which the conservatives' response should be, get rid of subsidies, get rid of incentives, completely move towards capitalism. But instead, conservatives like DeSantis are saying, "Oh, game on. We're going to use the force of government in the opposite way." And that's what DeSantis did in Florida. He's now prohibiting companies from participating in this stupid game. So it may be a short-term kind of good thing for running a business, but you are chipping away at liberty and creating a precedent that becomes very difficult to come back from. Justin,
a precedent that's already been created. He's just flowing with the precedent in the opposite direction.
Yeah. Justin with 199 says National Conservative is on the rise, unfortunately. Yeah, yes. That's true. Just a few short years ago, this guy, Yoram Chazoni, had a book out, The Virtue of Nationalism. This guy that I know, I used to know back in Detroit, sent me, he said, "Hey, can you forward this to Dave Rubin? Like, I really want to get this guy an interview on Rubin." Like, he was trying to help out this guy with the book, Virtue of Nationalism. Like, he was trying to get him on the show there because that's how small he was, 2017 or 18. Like, that's how relatively unknown Yoram was. And of course, now he is the man of the right. He is a force.
He's the intellectual I use to gauge how anti-intellectual the right is becoming, because he's the one who propounds, conservatives as defenders of tradition. And he doesn't question whether or not the tradition is good. Tradition in and of its own, for its own sake, is good. The fact that something has been here for a long time and has been practiced by people for a long time means that it's been vetted culturally over, generations and must be good. So he's for protecting the tradition, in Islamic states, as protecting traditions in America, which I think are very different. Right? They're very different. And not because cultures are different, not because we've experimented with these things and found these relative things to work in our states. They're different because one has embraced reason more and the other hasn't. And, it wouldn't be bad for one tradition to leave and the other tradition to be promoted.
God help us all. Coming up today at 9 p.m. UK time, it's HBTV with Harry Binswanger on refuting Robert Nozick's quote on the Randian argument, end quote. So if you thought Mayweather versus McGregor was a good fight, this is going to be a fight, folks. This is like Mark Pellegrino after surgery versus me at the height of my workout. This is going to be a real tough fight, a real close one. All right, everybody, please leave a like, and leave a super thanks. You know, you can leave a comment with a super thanks, which makes your comment stand out. So if you agree, or especially if you disagree, make your opinion known in the comment section below and hit that join button to become a member of the channel. We're going to jump over to Clubhouse. Hope you're able to join, Mark. Nadav in the chat requested that we do a Clubhouse show today, and it's been a while, and we like to help out Israelis since they're 90% of the objectivists in the world today. Thanks, Mark. It was a great show, and see you all back tomorrow for the Daily Objective. And goodbye.